Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my review of the Boise State 2024 signing class. This is a video that I am incredibly excited to do. It's really the first video of the 2024 season, breaking away from any reviews of 2023. We are now fully into preparing for 2024. This video is going to go through each and every single one of the signees from the February 7th National Signing Day class for Boise State, the highest ranked signing class in Boise State history. We will show highlights and tape from each and every one of these recruits for Boise State. We'll help you get to know them a little bit better. We'll go through, what other programs are interested in them, where they're from, some metrics and data on each of them, and then I'll give you my thoughts on their tape overall and what they might be able to present and bring to this program. Now, I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I am just a Boise State fan who loves being able to have an opportunity to talk about Boise State football. If you want to hear from the experts, I highly recommend that you read Ron Count's article where he went through every single one of these guys and did similar things to what I'm doing today. I highly recommend that each and every one of you go and read that article. I'll put a link in the description. And also, BJ Rains, of course, the best in Boise State entertainment. He put out a great video of the early signing day class. I'll put a link to that as well. So make sure you go watch that and read that content, because that's going to be really your best source for any of this Boise State news. But today, as a Boise State fan, and fifth year doing this channel, analyzing Boise State football, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the signing day class and give you some of the tape. Really is the main focus of this, looking at what these guys, what we can be excited to see from these guys in the 2024 season and beyond. So we're going to go through each and every one of these players. We are not including any walk-ons in this video because I don't want to leave anybody out, and it's kind of hard sometimes to find out who is officially on the walk-on program and who isn't. So we're not going to be talking about Tevin Griffey, Ken Griffey's junior's son, but we're not going to be talking about him or any other walk-ons. We're also not going to be talking about any of the players that have committed since the February 7th video. So depending on when you're watching this, some other guys might have committed. Like today, it was announced that Ryder Swanson, a offensive lineman, long snapper, has committed to Boise State. He wasn't part of the February 7th class, so we won't be reviewing him either. So like I said, make sure you guys read the article from Ron Counts, make sure you watch the video from BJ Rains, and then enjoy this one. This should be a great in-depth look at the Boise State 2024 signing class. I do also want to say real quick, I apologize for this video coming out late. Obviously, February 7th was a couple of weeks ago. Honestly, this video has been ready for about a week, but I've been fighting the absolute cold of my life, and it really doesn't seem to be going away right now, so I figured I'd just jump into it. I'm hopped up on all of the cold meds and pain meds, and I just had a hot toddy, so I can breathe, and I'm going to do this video, and I'll edit out any of the extensive coughing or anything else that happens as we go through. So, just summarizing what led us up to the February 7th National Signing Day. Well, obviously, Andy Avalos let go. Spencer Danielson jumps in as the head coach. Obviously, takes over as the interim head coach. Doesn't do a ton of jumping into the weeds in the recruiting there. Still manages to bring in a couple of players, but isn't announced as the official head coach of Boise State until after the conference championship win. He takes the job officially on December 3rd. Then he has a bowl game to prep for right away. He states that his #1 priority is making sure that players stay. So there's in the NIL transfer era, it is not a guarantee that any of the guys that are on our roster are going to be staying year to year. So his #1 priority is locking those guys down. He has an incredible win in getting Ashton Jeanty, coupled with an NIL deal, to stay at Boise State, and is able to maintain the structure from last year moving into this year with several other players announcing they are staying at Boise State. All the key parts are back at Boise State this season. Thanks in a big part to Spencer Danielson. Recent interview, Ashton Jeanty, Tyler Crow, they went on recent interview podcast. I'll put a link to that as well. It was a great interview, and talked about how Spencer Danielson was a big part of the reason that Ashton Jeanty decided to come back to Boise State. So make no mistake, the hiring of Spencer Danielson is already paying benefits even before he hits the recruiting trail. Then you have early signing date, December 20th, only 17 days after he is signed, and the class that he brings in, it's a good class. It's complete besides from Gatlin Blair, who Boise State loses, unfortunately. 4-star wide receiver, highest recruit from Idaho, goes to Oregon. So as 18 3-star guys in there, includes some JUCO gets. It's good, but it's not eye-catching. And there's some grumblings in the fan base, because the fan base is always grumbling, and if there's something to grumble about, they'll figure something out. So there's some grumblings in the fan base. Oh, man, this is why we shouldn't have gone with Spencer Danielson. Look at this class. And the class is good, especially considering the guy only had 17 days on the job officially and had other things that he had to prioritize and bring in. So the early signing day class gets signed. Some grumblings, but it's a pretty good class overall. It's not going to rank in the top of Boise State history. But I said, hey, considering where this guy is right now in his career at Boise State, considering what he had to do, the bowl season, keeping players, figuring out the reins as a brand new head coach, never been a head coach before, the fact that he was able to keep pretty much everybody, and losing Gatlin Blair, I mean, he was already kind of on the ropes. He was going to be taking a 2-year mission anyway. I really didn't expect Boise State was going to keep him in the long run. Anyway, considering all of that, this is a good class, and Spencer Danielson is not done. Well, my words definitely proved true, because Spencer Danielson was not done. He hit the portal, and he hit the portal hard. He brought in 2 4-star players, including 1 former 5-star player, and the #1 JUCO product in the country, from 3 Power 5 schools. So 3 different players transferring from Power 5 schools to play at Boise State. In addition to that, one of the signees from the early signing day class, one of the linebackers for Boise State, gets elevated to a 4-star status. This is incredible, because that never happens. A guy commits to a group of 5 program and then gets an additional star added to his name. That doesn't happen. In fact, if you watch and you monitor 24/7 Sports, you monitor the recruiting classes, in general, when somebody commits to a group of 5, they actually lose status. Boise State right now with Spencer Danielson, the guys that he's bringing in, they've elevated themselves to such a level that when you add players to this program, they're thought of in such a high esteem that they actually get stars added to them. Boise State adds a star to one of their already signed guys and adds another 4-star commit to this class for Boise State. It ends up being the best recruiting class in Boise State history, highest rated of any current Mountain West team in history. Spencer Danielson gets the job done. From December 3rd through February 7th, only a few months on the job, he ends up turning out in one of his first acts as Boise State head coach. He ends up being able to keep one of the best players in our school history, Ashton Jeanty. And of course, if you saw my announcement on Twitter, I'll be wearing this Ashton Jeanty Heisman shirt for the rest of the 2024 season. This is officially an Ashton Jeanty Heisman hype channel. So let's get that job done and vote Jeanty Heisman, hashtag Heisman with a 2. So he keeps Ashton Jeanty, and then he's able to turn around and create one of the best classes in Boise State history, attracting players to the program as a brand new head coach that are at an elite level that could have chosen to go elsewhere. We're already playing at a Power 5 level. We're going to talk about some of these guys. He brought in a Power 5 program's #1 wide receiver from Indiana. He brings in the backup from USC, a former 5-star guy, and brings in the #1 JUCO recruit in the country. It takes a very, very special person to do that. And of course, we haven't seen what Spencer Danielson can do as a head coach for a full season, where he is having to take the reins and work through challenges and all of that. Of course, taking over from Andy Avalos was not easy. But what we've seen so far from Spencer Danielson and what players are seeing, I mean, by their fruits they shall be known, right? The fruits that Spencer Danielson is producing right now speak a lot to not just the character. We already knew that he was a great persona, that he attracted players with his presence. But these guys are believing that they have a chance to compete for so much more here at Boise State and choosing to come here over other schools. And that comes down to coaching philosophy overall. So the season hasn't started yet. We still have a long way to go and a lot of things to preview before that. So stick around this channel. Make sure you like and subscribe. But right now, just from the early signing day and the official signing day here on February 7th, there is a lot of things to be excited for this 2024 season. All right, let's get into talking about each of these players. We're going to go through the offense. We'll go through the athletes. Obviously, they're all athletes, but some of these guys are going to be playing potentially multiple positions, or at least coming in looking at playing multiple positions. So as far as the class structure here, we'll go through the guys that are classified as offense, the guys that could end up playing both ways as athletes, and then we'll end up talking about the defensive players as well. So offense, athletes, defense, we'll go through each of these guys, and like I said, there'll be highlights, huddle highlights, or whatever their highlight sources are. Some of these guys have been playing at the Power 5 level or the FBS level already, so I had to grab their highlights from their Twitter or from YouTube. So highlights from all these guys. Some of them were hard to find, but highlights from each and every one of these players as we go throughout. So first off, starting off with the cream of the recruiting crop here, the cherry on top, the crown of achievement for Spencer Danielson, quarterback Malachi Nelson, 6'3", 190 pounds from California, somebody that nobody saw coming to Boise State until basically he was on his way to Idaho. Nobody had even thought about him coming to Boise State. This has never happened for Boise State, to have a guy who's already at a Power 5 program, who is a former 5-star, who is a current 4-star recruit, highest ranked recruit in Boise State history, to come to Boise State. Boise State is a diamond in the rough developer. They've brought in some great guys. I mean, George Holani was a 4-star recruit. They've had other 4 stars throughout their class. George Holani's class had some 4 stars in it. Boise State has brought in high-level guys, but they have traditionally gone after the guys that a lot of people aren't necessarily looking at to begin with, and they've developed them. When you bring in a player with this athletic potential already and then put him in the Boise State system to develop, exciting things can happen, and I know a lot of people are excited about Malachi Nelson. 4-star transfer from USC. He was a 5-star out of high school. He's a 33rd ranked transfer in the country. He was formerly ranked 13th overall coming out of high school. Injured his senior year out of high school, so didn't play much for USC. Played a little bit in their spring game. Didn't play much for them, though, throughout the season. And he only had 1 game that he played in versus Senzi State. Didn't really put up very many stats. But his high school stats speak for themselves. 7,988 yards passing, 105 touchdowns. He appears to be the heir apparent to the throne. Now, I will caution, and we're going to go through this in the Boise State offensive preview, and a lot of it will depend on who the new offensive coordinator is, because we don't know right now. But a lot of what Boise State ends up doing with the pieces on their roster will depend on who they bring in as their offensive coordinator. So I will caution that Maddox Madsen is not out of this race. George Holani said he's not out of this race. He said he's one of his players that he wants to keep an eye on, that he thinks has a strong potential this season. A lot of other players out there have been strongly supportive of Maddox Madsen. Spencer Danielson's a guy that values loyalty, that he's going to put the best player on the field. And this is a guy in Malachi Nelson who we're going to look through his tape. He's a great player, but he's also a guy who's coming off of an injury, similar to Maddox Madsen, but he doesn't have any playing experience. He doesn't have any playing experience at the collegiate level. Maddox Madsen is the most experienced quarterback on this roster. So I'm not saying Maddox Madsen should take the role, but for now, it should not be assumed that Malachi Nelson is going to be the starter. He said he wanted to come to Boise State because of the blue-collar work ethic, first off. Blue-collar work ethic means you earn everything you get. Nothing has been promised to him. He's going to have to earn that starting spot. He also wanted to come to a program that he knew he would be developed at. Sometimes the best thing for developing is not being thrown into the fire right away. So, we're going to look through some exciting tape. He's a great player, and I'm excited about what he brings to Boise State, and I think he has the lead, probably, to go earn that starting spot right now. But Maddox Madsen is not somebody who should be counted out, and he played great in the time that he was at Boise State. So, having said all of that, is he the heir apparent? Who knows? He might be. He is going to have a role in Boise State's future, whether that's this year or next season for sure, and this is a player that we need to keep an eye on. Let's go to the tape. So, for Malachi Nelson, there's a lot of things that pop out when you're looking through his tape. The first thing is effortless release. He really doesn't seem to try, and the ball just flies 40 yards down the field. Perfect spiral. He's very, very accurate with the ball. He's highly maneuverable. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's a running quarterback. I wouldn't say that he's Taylor Green. He's not that kind of running quarterback for Boise State, but he is very maneuverable. I wouldn't say he's necessarily Kellen Moore, just simply sneaky in the pocket. He has some moves. He's able to get out there in space. He has some running. But he moves to create the pass. That's what his focus is, getting the ball out. And that's what you love to see out of a quarterback. He tends not to underthrow. He's got really good height on his passes. Even the ones that don't necessarily need that, he puts a little bit extra height on that, and you love to see that. Having the wide receiver high point the ball, putting it in a position where only he can go out and get it. His passes are direct, though, not lofted. So he doesn't just simply air it out. He puts nice height on the ball, but he also gets it down the field quickly, and he throws really, really well on the run. We look at his spring, that's his high school tape. When you look at his spring game tape from USC, you don't necessarily see all the same highlights popping out. He is obviously overcoming an injury playing for them, and at the same time, it's playing at a Power 5 level against Power 5 guys. You still see some of the same things, though, and he's definitely a guy that's going to need to be developed a little bit. He said he wants to come to Boise State to be developed. He also has the potential to start right away, but he does have some things that need to be polished on. Some things you see from the spring game that are the same from his high school tape. You'll still see that effortless release. You still see the maneuverability. He's still moving to create the pass. He's still focused on getting the ball down the field. He tends to, his passes overall are still pretty direct, not lofting them, and he's still throwing great on the run, but he does have a couple of picks. He needs some good protection. You don't really see good protection in the spring game. I'm sure he should be able to have some better protection for Boise State in their real games than he did in that spring game, but when he's rushed, he is still making some errors and some mistakes, and he still needs some elements to be developed. I'm sure with a quarterback of this caliber, of this level, that development can come spring, fall, and be ready for the season. But he's not necessarily stepping on a Boise State's campus day one ready to be a starter. So I'm sure there will be some growing pains. However, definitely one of the players that you should be the most excited about for Boise State coming into this class and in their recruiting history. This was a huge win for Spencer Danielson. Moving on to the number 2 recruit overall in this class for Boise State, wide receiver Chris Marshall, 6'3", 205 pounds, out of Texas. This is a 4-star transfer, the number 1 transfer in the country. As a high school, he was a 4-star and 6th overall in the country out of high school. He went to Texas A&M, ended up transferring to Ole Miss where he was dismissed. There have been some off-field issues. I'm not going to go into them, but there have been some off-field issues. And Boise State is his last chance. The coaching staff have said that he realizes that Boise State is really his kind of last chance to turn himself around and to show that the on-field talent has not been questioned. It's the character building on the back end. There are very few schools that are going to develop your character as well as Boise State. Boise State, the players that they produce, I mean, just talking to George Halani last week, and definitely highly recommend everybody go watch that interview that I did with George Halani, kind of summarizing the 2023 season and what he's done to get to where he is today and what he's working on in the future. Outstanding interview, not because I'm a great interviewer, but because George Halani he answers every question perfectly. He's an incredible player, and that's what I'm talking about. He's not just an incredible player, but he's an incredible person, and that doesn't just happen by mistake. Boise State brings in players that are of high quality and a high character, and they also develop that character when you're at Boise State. It's not just about what you do on the field. They also want to develop the person, the leader, that's going to be going forward and representing the blue in the future. And so this is a great place for him to come to. I think he couldn't have come to a better place that can use his talents, obviously, but is also going to be focused on developing the man and not just the athlete. At JUCO, Kilgore College, he had 21 receptions for 449 yards, averaged 21.5 yards average per catch and 5 touchdowns. While he was at Texas A&M, he did see the field for a little bit, had 11 receptions for 108 yards, 9.8 yard average. And the Boise State wide receiver room, coming from this last season, was the weak link for the program. Latrell Caples gets injured. Boise State has a lot of very fresh guys that don't have a ton of experience. And then there's injuries throughout the season. And Boise State's wide receiver room was really hurting coming into this year. The running game, no questions. That is going to be dominant. But the wide receiver room is where they needed to bulk up. Well, they definitely did. They have some great guys coming back. Caples is going to be healthy. He is going to be an absolute monster on the field, especially at that slot position. And you have Prince and Bolt. They both showed up big coming back. George Halani had a lot to say about Bolt and what he can bring to the field, bring to the table. And he wasn't even playing fully healthy last year. Imagine what he's going to be able to do when he's 100%. And then Chase Penry, he's a guy who got injured last year. He's a transfer from Colorado, has Power 5 experience, is a very reliable receiver. He reminds me in some ways of Matt Miller. I'm excited about what he's going to be able to do coming back from injury with a little bit more experience. I think he's also going to be a weapon. But they lost their number 1 guy, Eric McAllister, gone. They need to replace that number 1 face in the wide receiver room, and they need to build a little bit more depth there across positions. This is a guy that's going to be able to do that, assuming that he's able to get on the field and stay on the field and develop that off-field character. Looking at his tape, incredible straight line speed. He invites contact. You love to see that from a wide receiver. He's not just trying to go down. He acts as a running back once he gets the ball in his hands. Tape emphasizes a lot of yard after carry, not a ton of deep balls. That could just be the offensive systems that he was working within. Boise State definitely has some great deep ball guys. I mean, Bolt and Prince, you can throw those guys out in a deep route. They'll be able to do it. Their underneath passing game was not necessarily their strong point this season. They need some guys that can be yards after catch, and this is a guy that could definitely step up and be that role. I'm not saying that, I'm sure he's a good route runner. He fights for the ball. I'm sure he can be a deep threat as well, but being able to see a guy that can make those extra yards after contact is really heartening to see, and I think that we're going to be able to see a lot out of this guy. Again, assuming that he can build on himself and allow the true athlete to show from underneath. So looking at another wide receiver for Boise State here, wide receiver Campers, another transfer. This is the guy out of Indiana that I was talking about, originally out of Texas, 6'2", 194 pounds. A lot of height when you're looking at this wide receiver class overall. Boise State, in general, has not had a ton of height in the receiving room, and we'll talk about that one. I actually wrote the stat down a little bit later on. They've had a lot of really fast, quick guys, but height hasn't necessarily been the number 1 focus. These guys, most of them are over 6 foot tall. There are some really tall, huge athletes that are going to be going out in the receiving room. It's going to look very, very exciting for the passing game this year. Three-star transfer from Indiana, number 4 wide receiver as a JUCO when he was transferring to Indiana. In 2022, he led the team in receiving, 46 receptions for 569 yards, 2 touchdowns, number 1 on the team, 12.4 yard average. This last year ended up dealing with some injuries, still ended up putting up 285 yards receiving on 17 catches, was actually averaging 16.8 yard average, so 4 yards more than he did his first season there, and he was number 3, even with an injury, number 3 overall on the team. Guaranteed starter. When you talk about guys in this class, there are some really strong receiving potentials, but he's probably the guy that I am maybe the most excited about from a receiving level. He's coming in with experience, assuming he's recovered from that injury. This is a guy that he's a big, looking at the tape, big body receiver, tons of experience. Could be the wide receiver number 1. Now, obviously, Chris Marshall, number 1 JUCO, recruited to 2 SEC schools, 6'3". He's going to be a guy that's going to bring a lot to the table. But Campers, he has that experience. He doesn't have any question marks around him besides the injury. And when you bring in a Power 5 program, even a Power 5 program like Indiana, when you bring in a Power 5 program's number 1 receiver over the last 2 years, 2 year school is Group of 5, it really shows the level that Boise State's at. This is not just a Group of 5 team. This is a Power 5 team trapped in a Group of 5 conference, and these recruits are recognizing that. They're recognizing that Boise State's path to the CFP, path to the playoffs this year is clearer than a lot of other programs out there, and a guy like Campers, who brings that experience, who brings that height, who brings the great route running. He's got some really, really strong hands. You know, when you look at Chris Marshall, I think he could maybe be like the Titus Young. When you look at Campers, he could be the Austin Pettis. Campers reminds me a lot of Austin Pettis out there, actually. And this 1-2 punch between the two of them is very, very exciting for the future of Boise State. Moving on to an offensive line recruit here, Dalton Mator. And I'm bad with name pronunciation, so bear with me as we go throughout this video. 6'4", 315 pounds out of California. 3-star guy, number 2 position in the JUCO realm as well. Another JUCO recruit out of Mount St. Antonio College. Boise State needs to fill 2 of the 5 slots on the offensive line from graduation. So this is a guy, JUCO, 6'4", 315 pounds. He's experienced. You know, he could come in and potentially contribute on that line. He absolutely mauls guys. When you're looking at the tape, he absolutely mauls them. He's a big body guy. He does seem to rely on his weight a little bit more than simply using his hands, using technique. He may need some polishing. He's definitely going to add depth. This is a guy that could come in with the right coaching and be a starter day 1. Day 1 of the starting season. He's got a full offseason needing to develop. But he's definitely going to build depth. I don't know necessarily that I think he's going to be the starter right off the bat, but he's definitely going to build depth at that offensive line position. I think he does need to develop some of his technique, especially if he's wanting to be a part of the passing game blocking as well. All right, another wide receiver, and this is where I wrote down the stat. Another tall wide receiver. Right now on Boise State's roster, the only guys over 6'2" are Strawn, Bolt, and Merriweather. So 2 starters right there, or 2 guys who've seen extensive playing experience. Merriweather really hasn't seen a ton of time. But that's it. Boise State's got a lot of other wide receivers on this roster, but none of them are over 6'2". All of these guys are over 6'2". This guy, Tyrone Jackson, 6'3", 180 pounds out of California, 3-star guy. He was looked at by Iowa State, Oregon, Oregon State, San Diego State, Utah, and Washington State. So 5 Power 5 programs were looking at him. In his senior year, he had 35 receptions for 433 yards and 8 touchdowns. Looking at his tape, he's got a great vertical. He also played basketball, so that's not surprising. He's got good balance after contact, and he attacks the ball. You love to see all of that. Boise State's got a lot of other great recruits that they brought in this recruiting class. We talked about a couple of wide receivers already, so he's got some names ahead of him. But he's a tall, big body wide receiver who can attack the ball aggressively. Again, maybe a chance to build depth here in a wide receiver room that's been significantly bolstered in this recruiting class. All right, running back for Boise State. We're under a running back now. Dylan Riley, this is a guy that a lot of people are excited about. Dylan Riley, the Jet, as he terms himself. 6 foot, 185 pounds out of California. 3-star, 81st in his position, so top 100 running back in the country. He was also looked at by San Diego State, FSU, San Jose State, and Washington State. 4,181 yards rushing in his career, 46 touchdowns, 10 200-yard games. I mean, this is a guy that can perform. And you're looking out at him, he's got a little bit of that DJ Harper-esque, a young, healthy DJ Harper-esque when you look at his tape. He has a whole lot of speed. This guy, I mean, this class overall, Ron Counts noted it, is a very, very fast class. So these guys have a ton of speed across the board. Whole lot of speed. No one can catch him. Very low center of gravity, especially for a 6-foot back. He's still got a low center of gravity when he takes hits. Definitely, I think, a chance at potentially working his way into the kick return game, if nothing else. Boise State needs somebody that can step up and be that explosive threat. They haven't had someone since Shakir left at that kick return game for them. And then I think he will see playing time. I really do. I think he's going to earn his way into that third back position. I'm really excited about him. And again, like I said, he reminds me of a young, healthy DJ Harper in some of these moves. That early, 2009 DJ Harper versus 2010 DJ Harper versus Virginia Tech. Like that's what he reminds me of a little bit, looking at his potential. Moving on to the tight end here, Kaden Anderson, 6'4", 225 pounds out of Arizona. 3-star, 80th overall in his position, so another top 100 recruit for Boise State at the position. He was looked at by Air Force and Army. Of course, you'd love it. You know that's going to be an OKG guy when you have institutions of that level of character development. I mean, the military is not going to look at you unless they think that you're somebody that can serve in the military and stay out of trouble overall. And so to be looked at and recruited by Air Force and Army, by military institutions, is a great look for a player that you know is going to work hard and have a good character off the field. 32 catches, 321 yards in 2022, injured in 2023. Boise State, in their info for him, lists that he can dunk a basketball. I thought it was kind of a funny stat to throw in there, but hey, that's always great to see. 6'4", 225 pounds, can get up and raise up and dunk that basketball, which means he can also go up and fight for the ball. Boise State's getting back to the tight ends being focused in the offense. Kind of took a little bit of a sabbatical there. They had some good receiving options. They didn't really go to them the last few years. I mean, last year we saw some great throws to the tight end, especially out of Smith and Louder. Louder's got a lot of potential in the receiving game, combined for 260 yards between the two of them. But I mean, we've seen guys in the past in the tight end position at 200 yards receiving by themselves. Boise State's starting to focus a little bit on the receiving, and having a guy like this who 321 yards receiving in his junior year can definitely go after it in the receiving game. Looking at his tape, obvious receiving threat. They even lined him up at wideout sometimes. Smart player in a complex offense. He was playing an offense, had a lot of screens, a lot of fakes, and he's a good route runner and an aggressive blocker. This is a guy that could come in as a freshman and at least be looked at as a potential receiving threat. And if you can also block, that's going to definitely help you get on the field as a tight end. So this is a guy I think you should keep your eye on for Boise State. Obviously, they got Louder, but they got to replace Smith. So they've got some guys that they need to replace in the tight end room. This is a big body, 6'4", definite receiving threat who could come in and play. Looking at another quarterback now. Now, before Nelson was grad for Boise State, this was the quarterback of their 2024 class. Caleb Annette out of California, 6'3", 185 pounds. 3-star, 100th overall at his position. He was looked at it by Princeton, which you love to see that, high IQ. Baylor, Oregon State, and San Diego State as well. He now enters what, when he was recruited, looked like an open opportunity, but now appears to be somewhat of a crowded quarterback room with Maddox Madsen, Malachi Nelson, and then also waiting in the rear, Fulton and Tiller, who have seen, and those are guys that have seen playing time. There's some other guys on the roster as well. But there's 4 quarterbacks on this roster that have seen playing time at the FBS level, and he's coming in as a high school guy. So I don't expect him to come in and compete for that starting job off the bat. Maybe try to work his way in as a backup. Probably going to take a red shirt to develop himself. 2,750 yards passing and 30 touchdowns his senior year. You look at his tape, he's got precision as a passer. He gets some great air on the ball, incredible arm strength and power on the move. And he's very, very shifty and quick. I was very impressed overall by his tape. This is not a sloucher by any extent. This is a guy that can come in and compete. Unfortunately, he's now coming into a room with a former 5-star quarterback that looks like the heir apparent. And also, Maddox Madsen was going to have his hat in the ring anyway. And then you got guys who experience like Fulton and Tiller. This is a crowded room now. He's definitely going to have to work his way up and probably won't see playing time for a little while here at Boise State. But who knows what the future holds. This is a competitor, and he's definitely going to come in and put his foot forward, his best foot forward on day one. Now, the offensive line. We got 2 more guys here for the offense before we move on to athletes. Offensive line. And I am absolutely going to butcher this pronunciation of the name, but Toya Omongan. I am sure that is 100% wrong. Hopefully, gets to come in and play early for Boise State, gets his name called by the professional announcers so we can all learn it together. But 6'3", 275 pounds out of Arizona. 3-star athlete, 45th overall in his state. He was looked at by both Air Force and Cornell, so again, high IQ and also high character. When you're looking at his tape, he's got a great use of his hands. So he's not just using his weight and his body height. He's trying to go out there and use the technique, use his hands. He's good job creating the contact. He goes and attacks the defensive line, controls the outcome. I think this is a guy that, again, Boise State's building some great depth at their offensive line. Not every one of these guys that are coming in are going to start right away, but they're building for the future, and they're also building for an offensive line that's experienced injuries over the last few years, especially when you are attacking in the running game. You're going to have guys that are getting worn out in a quick, fast-paced offense. Boise State's building some great depth here, and I love what he comes in is able to develop and use the technique. I love that. He's a guy that I think, comes in, gets developed, gets in the weight room a little bit, could potentially be one of those guys you see out there in the next couple of years for Boise State. All right, one more offensive line, and honestly, I think that this is probably one of the best names in the entire class for Boise State. Gregory Banvenu, which means welcome in French. So when you're saying bienvenue to the recruiting class overall, welcome to Boise State, it's great to have a guy last name like this. Oui, je parle un peu de français, just a little bit. I have 3 siblings adopted from Haiti, so I can manage my way through French and Creole. Not great at it by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought that was funny when reading through recruiting class and seeing that last name. 6'4" offensive lineman, 280 pounds out of Arizona. 3-star, 49th overall in his state. Another guy out of Arizona. Boise State brought in 3 guys from Arizona. Pipeline for Boise State, I guess now. Looking at his tape, they line him up at fullback. Boise State used that Clydesdale package, so here's a guy that could come in, already knows the system. Good movement for a large offensive lineman. 6'4", 280 pounds on the edge of that 300 range. He's got some really good lateral movement. Will work well in a fast-paced offense, run-heavy system. Good combo of size and technique. Like you look at Dalen, guy that's got some good size and uses his size effectively, and then you look at a Toya, guy that uses his technique well. I think this is a guy that does a good combination of both, and I like him as a guy that could potentially come in here and earn a starting role. Definite potential here, and I think somebody you're going to want to look at, and bienvenue to Boise State. All right, looking at the athletes here for Boise State. So we've got 4 athletes that could potentially end up looking at playing both ways for Boise State. Looking first at Sione Gains, and I believe it was said in the interview with Ashton Genty that they're actually using him as an offensive player in the running back room, which some other people said on Twitter that's a little bit of a surprise because Boise State's already got a pretty stacked offensive room right now, but that was a decision that was being made by Bush Hamdan. New offensive coordinator come in is going to look at things differently, but this is a guy that can play both ways. 3-star guy, 6 foot, 193 pounds out of California. Get the height and everything out there. 3-star guy, 79th overall at his position. He was committed to Arizona State, and then Spencer Danielson was hired on December 3rd. Coincidentally, ends up decommitting on the same day that Spencer Danielson's hired. I'm sure that's no coincidence. And then 4 days later, 4 days into a brand new head coach's career at Boise State, he commits to Boise State. So this is a guy that was looked at by Arizona State, Washington State, Arizona, OSU, Washington, 4 other Mountain West schools. I mean, he had a ton of interest being looked at, and he chooses to come to Boise State. So this is a guy that can play both ways. Probably, like I said, if he's used in the offensive room, probably going to be looked at offensively. He has 1,685 yards rushing for 27 touchdowns. Also had 351 yards receiving. As a defensive guy, he had 30 tackles, 2 sacks, interception. He was listed as a safety and a wide receiver. However, I would assume that he's going to be looked at primarily for his running abilities. When you look at the tape, he has some backyard energy out there. I mean, he just cuts broken tackles from his running back room, from his running back tape. He's all over the field. He looks like he's playing backyard football. The other guys cannot keep up with him. He has some nice moves out there, and that's, I'm sure, why Bush Hamdan was looking at him in the offensive capacity, especially when you're looking at somebody. Boise State uses their running backs in the receiving game. This is a guy listed as a wide receiver who played running back. obviously he's going to be able to contribute in both as well. Good mix of power, moves, and speed. It's not blazing like some of these other guys. Like I was definitely more impressed by the running back tape of Dylan Riley, but he's got a good mix of everything when it comes to the running back position, and he runs some decent routes overall, especially for a guy that primary position there was running back. Looking at his safety tape, he plays close to the line, a little bit more in that linebacker role, but he's got good burst, quick diagnosis of the play. He's aggressive in his pursuit, running down screens, and he's getting back into coverage. So this is a guy that's got a lot of speed and a lot of potential. It'll be interesting to see what the new offensive coordinator comes in and decides to do with him. But like the rest of the athletes on this table, someone that is very exciting, good speed overall, and can be looked at in a lot of different positions. Looking at Travis Anderson here, 6 foot, 175 pounds out of California. 3-star guy, 89th overall in his position. Was also recruited by Fresno State and UNLV, choosing the best Mountain West school out of all of them to come to Boise State. List of positions were free safety and wide receiver. He had a senior year, 109 tackles, 7 interceptions. His tape in his main video on Huddle does not show any offensive stats. Boise State had said that he had 200 all-purpose offensive yards in his career, so assuming between running and receiving. I assume he's listed, like I said, as a free safety and wide receiver. I would assume that he comes in here and is looked at primarily at defense, especially in a secondary that needs some depth. So fights for the ball. I like that he acts as the receiver. When he's out there on defense as a safety, he has some very impressive picks. And it's because once the ball is in the air, he's not acting like he's covering the guy. He's acting like he's the target for the pass, and he's going up and he's getting it. He's got good awareness and form. He reminds me a lot of Shea Oladipo, and I think that this is a guy who could come in and earn a role on this roster. Cameron Bates, 5'9", 165 pounds out of Texas, 3 stars. He was recruited also by Texas Tech. For his career, he was a quarterback, and then he was also a wide receiver. So he passed initially for 1,317 yards and 21 touchdowns, had 947 yards rushing, and 17 touchdowns on the ground. And then his senior year, he switches over to wide receiver, has 909 yards receiving and 13 touchdowns, 51 touchdowns overall between the two of those years. He broke the school record in hurdles. So this is, when you define athlete, he can throw the ball, he can run the ball, he can catch the ball, and you don't necessarily always see guys making that smooth transition from wide receiver, from quarterback to wide receiver. Sometimes it's quarterback to tight end, but you don't always see that smooth transition from true quarterback to true wide receiver, and this looks like a guy that can make that transition. He's listed as a quarterback and a wide receiver, very, very stacked quarterback room, wide receiver room with some opportunities. I would assume that he comes in and gets looked at. When you look at for the wide receiver position, look at his tape though. Quarterback tape, he's got a good burst and quick burst and good decision making in the run. So obviously you see that translate into the wide receiver room as well in his yards after carry and his ability to make moves in open space. As a quarterback, he's got really good ball placement. I'll definitely give that to him. I don't think he impresses me over guys like Annette or Nelson, but definitely a guy that could go both ways. As a wide receiver, I think he's going to be an outstanding slot receiver for Boise State. I mean, he's got that great slot receiver height. You know, it reminds you a little bit of Shane William Rhodes. Good moves in hands, open field ability, can catch the ball in a crowd. You know, Latrell Caples right now is really the only true slot receiver on the Boise State roster. Boise State's brought in a lot of really tall guys, and they have some tall guys returning that have been deep threats, but none of them are that true kind of shorter, stockier built slot role that you typically see. Penry maybe being able to step in. He was used a little bit in that role. But Boise State doesn't really necessarily have those a good depth of true slot guys. I think this is a guy that can come in and play that slot role. Also, Boise State has really not heavily utilized the trick play in recent years. We saw it a little bit under Bush Hamden, and maybe this new offensive coordinator that Boise State brings in will bring that back, but that's been a staple of the Boise State past. They had Riley Smith out there, former quarterback, his entire time at Boise State, never got to throw any passes. I definitely think that was a lost opportunity. I felt like that was a potential that we were going to be able to see him go out there as a tight end and throw that pass. But this is a guy that's a quarterback and a wide receiver in that slot position. Maybe this is that opportunity. Who knows? Who knows how he's going to be used? But he definitely brings that arm in addition to his upfield abilities. You throw him the ball, the receiver's not open, he can make some moves in open space. Maybe this is how Boise State works its way back into that wide receiver passing trick plays that we've seen utilized so heavily in the past. This would be a great way to work back in, so I'm excited about him. Roman Kaywood, 6'4", 220 pounds, out of Utah, 3-star, was recruited by Washington State, Fresno State, Nevada, and Idaho. So again, a kid picking the right school in Idaho to come play at. 92 tackles, 25 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 2 blocked field goals in his career. Listed as an edge, a wide receiver, and a tight end. So looking at his tape, he's got some great ball tracking, and he definitely high points the ball. But for his defensive side, I think that that's probably where he's going to be utilized more heavily. Again, pretty wide receiver class coming in for Boise State. Some opportunities, but they need some help on the edge. They do. They need some help on the defensive line. They haven't had those guys that can really get quickly to the quarterback. I mean, obviously, you've got guys like Ahmad Hassanin who've just been killing it out there, and you've seen guys that have shown some great bursts throughout the last few years, but Boise State really hasn't put a ton of pressure from that edge position recently. Maybe this is a guy who can come in and do that. You look at, he's got good speed off the edge, mostly using bull rush. He does a good job of sealing off the edge, though, and he's got some raw talent that needs to be developed. I don't necessarily think this is a guy that comes in and starts right away, but I think this is a guy that you probably see end up on defense. Honestly, obviously, he's got a lot more athletic size than me, but that's what I played in high school. I played D-end, wide receiver, and tight end. So I'm a little familiar with where he's come from on this. I do think he probably ends up playing the defensive side of things, but who knows what the future holds for him. I'm sure that it's going to be a future for him at Boise State, not a present. I don't think you're going to see him year one. Probably redshirt, get developed, and we see how he works out in 2025 and beyond. For defense, so offense done through the athletes, now on to the defense for Boise State. And while the offensive class had a ton of media alerting picks and transfers, the defense didn't necessarily bring that. They didn't necessarily have the same eye-catching guys, the same eye candy, but it is still a solid defensive class. And for Boise State, the defense is really where they need to work. They've got two of the best special teams players in the entire country at their position. Boise State has the best combined punter and kicker in the entire country. No other school can field a punter and a kicker of the quality that Boise State has. Their offense is going to be one of the most dangerous in the entire nation, not just for the Group of Five, but also at the Power 5 level. But the defense is where Boise State's got some things they need to work on, and I don't think anybody would argue with that. This class will help. They've brought in some guys that are not just going to build depth, but could potentially come in and start right away. One of those guys is Jeremiah Irby, 6'2", 195 pounds, out of California. He's a transfer from Cal. 3-star in high school, 71st in his position. At Cal, between 2022 and 2023, he had 61 tackles, 17 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. I believe he's a huge get for Boise State. There's a lot of guys to be excited about in this class, but at least from a defensive perspective, he's one of the guys I'm most excited about. Boise State needs, their secondary needs some work. They need some experienced leaders there. They've got some great guys. I am not dissing at all on the Boise State defenders that are coming back. They have some true athletes out there. Tubner, Oladipo, McCoy, just to name a few, are going to be beasts out there for Boise State. But they need depth, and they need some starters at some key positions, especially because of some off-field stuff that happened this last season as well. So when you look at his tape, which was very hard to find, I'll say that. Very, very hard to find the tape, so I do apologize for a little bit of the quality and the way that it's portrayed. I had to go to some YouTube and some shorts and stuff to grab tape for him, but very hard to find. But when you look at the tape, that it does exist out there. 2 picks, a fumble return for a touchdown. It's very impressive, obviously, as big plays are apt to be, but the stats and the experience are what explodes most for me. The stats, the Power 5 experience, 61 tackles in 2 years, the passes defended, the interceptions. He's a big body defensive back, 6'2", almost 200 pounds. He's got a physical size that I think in a lot of ways is similar to Jalen Clark. I like what he can bring to the table for Boise State. I think that he's going to be one of your guys that steps up as a starter day one for this program. All right, looking at another transfer, edge Tarian Woodard, 6'4", 265 pounds, out of Indiana. 3-star out of high school, 18th in his state. He's transferring from Ball State, where he has played for 4 years. 75 tackles between 2021 and 2023. He had 10.5 sacks. In 21 and 22, he had 4 and 4.5 sacks. So this is a guy that is racking up the numbers out there, and Boise State needs a guy like that. I mean, they have Ahmad Hassanin, but they don't have a ton of guys that are consistently getting after the quarterback, like I've said already. Ron Count says that he's got 1 year left, so this is a guy that you bring. He doesn't transfer out of Ball State, where he's already playing at an FBS level. He doesn't transfer to a school like Boise State unless he expects to be able to play right away. So I assume that he's going to contribute immediately, especially with Dimitri Washington gone. Boise State's got some guys out there already. Ahmad Hassanin's been mentioned a couple times. I was very impressed by what Virgin, Newton, and Gums all did last season, but I still think that you need to find that next level guy that's going to be able to step up on the edge, that's going to be able to complement Ahmad Hassanin and maybe even break him free a little bit so he can't get double teamed. You need to find that next level presence, because Boise State's defensive lines in the past, they've not been built on one guy. They've usually had that one guy that pops up and is the star, DeMarcus Lawrence, Weaver, Wheeler, all those guys. Those are the guys you think of when you think of Boise State defensive line, but they always had guys around them that were opening them up because they were threats as well. And I'm not saying Virgin, Newton, and Gums aren't, but I'm saying that we haven't seen necessarily that next level explosive talent from them. And this is a guy that could potentially come in and do that. He's got good size, great awareness. He closes very, very quickly, especially for a big guy. He reminds me a little bit of Dimitri Washington. He's similar size, 6'3", 275 for Dimitri Washington. This guy coming in at 6'4", 265. So he's got an inch on him already, and he's only 10 pounds under. So this is a guy that I think is able to come in and pick up where Dimitri Washington left off. Linebacker for Boise State. This is another guy. This was a guy that got his stars raised to 4. Klay Matau, 6'3", 210 pounds out of Oregon. 34th overall in his position, second in his state. Was recruited by Washington State, University of Washington, BYU, Air Force, and Idaho. Chose Boise State. Like I said, he had his star elevated to 4 stars in this last cycle. 107 tackles in 2 years, 16.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 3 interceptions, and 6 passes defended. You look at his tape, he has terrifying closing speed. He's standing there one moment, the next thing you know, the guy's on the ground. Great hands. He also played wide receiver, so he's got really good hands. Going to be great in coverage. He's a hard hitter. He got some J.L. Skinner-esque vibes. I mean, that is high praise to put out there. I'm not saying he's J.L. Skinner. Not a lot of people are, but he hits in a way that reminds me a little bit of the all-time great for Boise State there. And I think that he could build depth the freshman year. I don't think he's necessarily going to come in and start. Boise State's got some great linebackers out there already. Simpson's going to be an absolute star for this team. They've got some other guys as well that played well for Boise State. So I don't think he's not going to come in and replace anybody in that starting position, but I think he could be a guy that builds depth, that sees playing time in his freshman year, and then becomes that starting star for Boise State in the future. Looking at edge position here, Joseph Marsh, a JUCO guy, 6'3", 225 pounds out of California. Second in his position, 27th nationally for JUCO. College of the Canyons, in his 1 year there, he had 36 tackles, 15.5 tackles for loss in 1 year. JUCO level, but 15.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, and 2 passes defended as an edge. Out of high school, he had 108 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 7 sacks in 3 years. So in 1 year in the JUCO level, he has 1.5 more tackles than he did for loss than he did in 3 years. And he also has as many sacks in 1 year as he did for 3 years in high school. This is a beast. Combination of moves, hands, and speed when you look at the tape. Major threat off the edge. Power to hold the line and then explode for the sack. He reminds me of Jabril Frazier. I think that he will contribute this season. I think he could be the piece that we've been missing. I talked about that guy to complement Ahmad Hassanin. I think Tarian Woodard can do that. I think he can play in a Dimitri Washington type level. I think this guy could be Jabril Frazier, potentially DeMarcus Lawrence-esque. This is a very exciting guy. 6'3", he's lean at 225. He's got the weight, obviously, but he's fast. Looking at his tape, I'm drooling right now over his potential at Boise State. And maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but this is a guy that you have got to keep an eye on, because I think he could be that 1-2 punch complement to Ahmad Hassanin. And he was recruited by Jabril Frazier, and he reminds me of him in a lot of ways. So potential to build up to something even more, could be that all-time star at Boise State. I'm excited about a lot of these guys. This is a guy off the edge position, which we need depth, and we need to be able to find that speed. Well, he brings potential for both of those. Cornerback Tyrone Jackson, 5'11", 165 pounds, out of California. 3-star overall, recruited by Michigan, Washington State, and UNLV. Senior season, 72 tackles, 12 interceptions, 25 passes defended. Looking at his tape, he really locks down the receiver, doesn't give any space. He targets the ball like he's a receiver. Again, you love to see that out of a DB. Great catching the ball, high and away from his body. I mean, this isn't a guy that's just lining up there like he's catching it in the punt. I mean, he's going out and he is high pointing. He is catching the ball with his hands away from his body. Very aggressive. One to watch in fall camp. It's a position that needs depth. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to be the starter like Irby, I think, can come in and be, but I think he can definitely build depth there, and he's one to watch in fall camp. Linebacker Senzi Braquet, 6'2", or Bracket. I might be kind of putting a little bit of a French pronunciation on that. 6'2", 230 pounds, out of California. 3 stars. Senior year, 70 tackles, 4.5 sacks. He's a very, very hard hitter when you look at his tape. I think he needs some developing. He needs to work on his coverage and his tackling, especially his form. I think he's hitting a little high and focusing kind of on the knockout blow versus the wrap and bring to the ground. But this is a guy that I think is exciting for the future, but I think he's definitely something that needs to be developed. Defensive end, Travier McKenna, 6'6", 255 pounds, out of Boise, Idaho, and Boer, local kid. They only recruit out of Boise, Idaho in this class. 3-star, at least that was signed and not as a walk-on. 3-star, third in state. Again, he was looked at, of course, by Idaho, but again, picked the best school there, the hometown school. Senior, 90 tackles, 23 tackles for loss, and 16 sacks. It's reported by Prater that he was born in student housing. I don't know if that is a literal definition, that he's saying he was literally born in student housing, or that's like how close he was to Boise. He was basically born in student housing. But regardless, this is a guy that has bled blue from birth and is part of the not just the program, but part of the fandom, and now getting to be part of the team. So this is a guy that I think a lot of people are rooting for. No senior year highlights for him posted on his huddle. He did show his Boise State camp. So when you look at that, he lined up at both offensive line and defensive line for the Boise camp. I assume they're going to bring him in at defensive edge. That's what he's listed at. But interesting to see that he was used at both. In his offensive line tape from the Boise State camp, he had good blocking. He was aggressive and tenacious and great use of hands. And for his defensive line stuff, I mean, fast step at defensive line. He's got long arms. 6'6" guy, 255 pounds. Diamond in the rough, I believe. Needs a little bit of polishing, but you love to see the local kids come in and recruit and I think compete. I think this is a guy that's definitely going to do that. Obviously playing at his dream school, and that also always elevates the level of competition. All right, looking at defensive line again, Connor Walkington, 6'5", 250 pounds, out of California. 3-star, recruited by Air Force, Army, and Fresno State. 67 tackles, 22 tackles for loss, and 8 sacks. Looking at his tape, he's got good eye discipline. He fights through the blocks when he's going in for the running back in the pack. He hits hard, and he fights back to the tackle. You see a couple of these plays, he's coming back, and he's making the tackle on the screenplay. This is a guy that fights extremely hard out of that defensive line position. There's some other guys that I'm a little bit more excited out for that defensive line spot. But I think this is a guy that I think potentially 6'5", 250 pounds. He's got really good speed. He's got good awareness, and I like what I see out of him. He's definitely someone that can be developed into a starter for Boise State. Defensive line, Lopez Senzi, 6'3", 280 pounds, out of London, England. 3-star, 4th overall in England. Boise State has a great history of bringing in international recruits. I mean, Geraldo Boldewijn is a star for Boise State from the Kellen Moore era, the wide receiver for them that they were able to bring in, and one of my favorite players formerly out of the Netherlands. Last year they brought in a defensive lineman out of Germany. At one point they had like 8 guys out of Canada. So Boise State's really done a great job of recruiting in those kind of non-typical recruiting circles and finding the right guys no matter where they are. And then of course the last guy that Boise State brought in from England was Jay Ajayi. And so that should say a lot about, where this could potentially lead. English-born to Nigerian parents. Senzi is actually Irish-born to Nigerian parents, and then went through an NFL academy in London, England. So there's a lot of similarities already between these two guys, and when you start talking similarities with Jay Ajayi, things get exciting. So obviously different position, defensive line, and there's a lot of other things that go into a player than just where they're from. But I'm excited about him. He played in Northern Ireland, born in Dublin. He worked with a former Boise State linebacker in Chase Baker. I'm sure you all remember Chase Baker, former Boise State great. Senior team from Belfast actually beat IMG Academy, the first European team to ever beat an American high school team. His tape, when you look at it, he's a big raw talent. He will need to be developed, and obviously he's not been playing in American coaching circles, so he's definitely going to need to be developed. But he's a major force on the interior line. He's always winning his one-on-ones. He's got good lateral movement combined with forward push, and he shows a true drive and dedication to the game. I mean, it takes a lot to be born in Europe and to play football and want to play American football. And so he's already shown that drive and that dedication, going that extra step, not having anything handed to him. So he's going to come in with the right blue-collar work ethic and come and find a spot here at Boise, I'm sure of it. All right, looking at a couple more guys here. Defensive lineman Hayden Hanks, 6'4", 270 pounds, out of Montana. 3-star guy, second in his state. He's looked at by Montana and Montana State. For his stats, senior year, 10 games, 62 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and 9 sacks. Looking at his tape, he explodes off the line faster than you would expect for 270 pounds. Every tackle, his target is falling backwards. I mean, he meets that mountain that is Hanks, and he goes flying back. Great lateral speed, good wrapping up to bring down. I think he could be special. I really do. I don't necessarily know if he's a come in and start day one guy, but there's some Tyrone Crawford-esqueness to him. Another 6'4", 290 guy, 6'4", 270 pounds here for Hanks. He hits hard, he plays with aggression, and he's got some great lateral speed and quick first step. And I'm excited about what he may be able to do here, building depth on that defensive line. Last guy, linebacker Duka is Zeni. 6'2", 200 pounds, out of Texas. JUCO guy, 3-star, 12th overall for JUCO linebackers. He was at Butler Community College, previous 2 years at Missouri State. He played for Oregon State and, he was recruited by Oregon State and by Oregon. In 9 games at Butler, he had 52 tackles, a sack, and an interception. I think he's got tremendous closing speed. I think he flies to the tackle. I think he's a great run stopper. You love to see those JUCO guys that have worked for everything they've got, they've worked their way up, and are coming in with some experience. He's played, he didn't produce any stats at Missouri State, but he's been around in the system for 3 years now, and he did a great job of showing up at Butler. This is a guy who could come in with experience and find a way to build depth in that linebacker room day one. All right, so summarizing overall, there's a lot of first-year contributors here. We've talked about some of them. There's some guys that maybe I overlooked that could definitely step up. I mean, every player on this recruiting roster I see a potential for in the future for Boise State. It greatly strengthens the roster. Boise State was good last year. They had weaknesses they need to fill. I think they've filled a lot of these weaknesses. I think they're going to be great. Defense is going to be the big question mark and needs to be developed, and there's a lot of things that are going to need to be shifted around, not just players, but scheme-wise as well. Boise State's already done a good first step of filling those holes, and now if they can adjust the scheme to the players they've got, this could be a championship team. And obviously, championship level teams are built on their defenses. Boise State's got the explosive, flashy offense that's going to get them points. Now they got to get yards. Now they got to get the defense that can back them up on that as well. I think they've done a good way of going towards getting that. Very impressive, flashy offensive class and a defensive class with a lot of grit, a lot of determination, a lot of true, maybe some diamond in the rough guys, and some guys that can come in and start right off the bat. Especially at defensive line. I love Boise State. You heard me saying it over and over again. Defensive line, defensive end. Boise State has aggressively recruited the defensive line where they maybe didn't show the same strength that they have in the past this last season. Class overall, there's a whole ton of speed, adaptable, multifunctional athletes. They can slot into any offensive defensive system, which Boise State needs in the future. So for Boise State, the future is very, very, very bright. This recruiting class, highest ranked one ever in school history, should bring a lot of hope to a program that was already, a fan base that was already on the hype train of hope right now. There's a lot to be excited about for this team, for this future for Boise State, and what they're going to be able to do in 2024 and beyond in this new college football world. So, thanks so much for watching. There is a lot more that's going to be coming in over the offseason. I've got my spring game video. Hopefully I'll be able to get highlights from that and put out a spring game highlight video like I did last year. Thank you so much, Bronco Nation, for contributing to that this last season. I'm going to need your help again this year. I got the 2024 position previews. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, I'll be shooting my first one, the defensive preview, so working out some exact dates and times on that. But I should have an announcement coming out pretty soon with who's going to be featured in that. Then we'll have the offense and special teams previews. Got guests locked down for both of those. It's going to be an incredible preview series. So make sure you like, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that. And if you missed out on the George Halani video, I'll put a link in that description as well. Make sure you go check that out. As said at the beginning, make sure you check out Ron Count's content in his in-depth preview, written preview of this class, and make sure you check out BJ Rains. In general, make sure you like, subscribe to Bronco Nation News. It's the best source for Boise State of any place you're going to find, but he also does a great job of breaking down the early signing day class. So overall, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for sticking around. Hope that this was a fun video for you. And I enjoyed doing it, even despite having to work through some illness here as well. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, vote Ashton Jeanty for Heisman, and as always, go Big Blue!